The flour dust hung in the air like a condemned woman's last breath, as Alina Nash's trembling fingers closed around the loaf of bread. Her hollow cheeks and sunken eyes testament to the 3 days she had gone without eating in the sweltering heat of Abilene, Texas, this merciless August of 1878. The baker's shout pierced the afternoon stillness before she even made it to the door, his meaty hand clamping down on her bony wrist with enough force to make her cry out, the bread tumbling from her grasp onto the dusty wooden floorboards. "Thief! I've got a thief!" Mr. Henderson bellowed, his face turning the color of a ripe tomato as he dragged Alina toward the front of his establishment, where curious townspeople were already beginning to gather at the commotion. She did not fight him, had no strength left to fight anyone, her worn calico dress hanging off her frame like a burial shroud, her once beautiful auburn hair now dull and tangled beneath a faded bonnet. Alina had arrived in Abilene 3 weeks prior on the stagecoach from San Antonio, carrying nothing but a carpet bag with 2 changes of clothes, and the last $5 her dying mother had pressed into her palm. That money had run out a week ago, and every door she had knocked on seeking employment had been firmly closed in her face. The respectable families wanted references she could not provide, and the saloons wanted things she would not give. Starvation had seemed preferable to selling herself, but now, faced with the rage of the baker and the growing crowd, she wondered if she had made the wrong choice. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over Henderson's continued shouting. "I was hungry. I have not eaten in days." "That is no excuse for stealing," Henderson roared, shaking her arm roughly. "I work hard for my living, and I will not have vagrants taking what is mine. Someone fetch the sheriff." Alina's vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges as the heat and hunger conspired to pull her under. She swayed on her feet, certain she was about to collapse right there in the baker's shop, when a deep voice cut through the chaos like a knife through warm butter. "How much for the bread?" Every head turned toward the doorway, where a tall figure stood silhouetted against the bright Texas sun. As he stepped into the shop, Alina's dimming consciousness registered details through a haze. Broad shoulders stretching the fabric of a dust-covered blue shirt, dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to take in everything with one sweeping glance. Nathan Brooks removed his hat as he approached, revealing a face that was handsome in a rugged, weathered way, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's worth of stubble and a mouth set in a firm line. He could not have been more than 25, but there was something in his bearing that spoke of a man who had seen more of life than his years suggested. "I said, 'How much for the bread?'" Nathan repeated, pulling a leather coin purse from his vest pocket. "And for whatever else she might have taken." Henderson's grip on Alina loosened slightly as he eyed the cowboy with a mixture of suspicion and interest. "Just the 1 loaf. That will be 15 cents, but that is not the point. She is a thief, and thieves need to be punished, or else everyone will think they can just take what they please from honest merchants." Nathan counted out the coins with deliberate care, then added 2 more. "There is 30 cents. Consider the extra payment for your trouble and your discretion." His tone was polite, but carried an undercurrent of steel that made it clear this was not a negotiation. "I am sure a businessman such as yourself understands the value of maintaining good relations with his customers." The baker's eyes narrowed as he calculated, greed warring with indignation on his florid features. Finally, he released Alina's wrist and snatched the coins from Nathan's outstretched palm. "Fine, but I do not want to see her in my shop again, you understand, not unless she has money to pay." "Understood." Nathan bent to retrieve the fallen bread, dusting it off with his hand before turning his attention to Alina. Up close, she could see the concern in his gray eyes as they traced the sharp angles of her face, the way her dress hung loose on her frame. "Miss, are you all right?" Alina tried to answer, tried to thank him, but the world tilted suddenly sideways and her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground, and she found herself pressed against Nathan's chest, breathing in the scent of leather and sage and horses. She heard his voice as if from a great distance, felt herself being lifted, and then darkness claimed her completely. When consciousness returned, Alina found herself lying on a narrow bed in a room she did not recognize. The ceiling above her was rough-hewn timber, and late afternoon light slanted through a single window, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily through the air. For a moment, panic seized her, every dire possibility racing through her mind. But then she noticed the glass of water on the small table beside the bed and the folded blanket at her feet, and something about the simple domesticity of these items calmed her racing heart. The door opened and Nathan entered carrying a tray. When he saw she was awake, relief flooded his features. "You are back with us. Good. I was starting to worry." He set the tray on the table, and Alina's stomach clenched painfully at the sight and smell of food. Bread, cheese, sliced apples, and what looked like cold chicken. "Where am I?" she managed, her throat dry and scratchy. "My place." "It is not much, just a room above the livery stable where I work, but it is clean and private." He pulled up a rough wooden chair and sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. "I am Nathan Brooks. I would have taken you to the boarding house, but Mrs. Patterson would have asked too many questions, and I figured you could do without the gossip." "Alina Nash," she replied, struggling to sit up. Her head spun, but she managed it, pulling the blanket around her shoulders despite the heat. "I should not be here. This is not proper." "If anyone finds out, your reputation, my reputation can handle it," Nathan interrupted gently. "But yours is another matter, which is why we are going to keep this quiet. Now, before we talk about anything else, you need to eat." "Slowly," he cautioned as she reached for the bread with shaking hands. "Your stomach will not thank you if you bolt it down." It took every ounce of Alina's willpower to follow his advice, to take small bites and chew thoroughly when what she wanted was to stuff everything into her mouth at once. Nathan watched silently, refilling her water glass when it emptied, and did not speak again until she had taken the edge off her hunger. "Thank you," Alina said finally, setting down the chicken bone she had been nibbling. "For the bread, for paying the baker for this. I will pay you back, I swear it. Every penny. I am not a thief. I have never stolen anything in my life before today, but I was just so hungry and I could not think straight, and I thought maybe just one loaf, just enough to keep going a bit longer." "I am not worried about the money," Nathan said quietly. "What I am worried about is what drove a young woman to steal bread in the first place. You said you have not eaten in 3 days. How did you end up in such a state?" So Alina told him. The words came haltingly at first, then in a rush, as if a dam had broken inside her. She told him about her mother's long illness, about nursing her through those final terrible months in their cramped San Antonio boarding house. She told him about the money running out, about selling everything they owned just to pay for medicine that did not work, and a funeral that left her with nothing. She told him about a distant cousin in Abilene who had promised her a position as a seamstress, only to discover upon arrival that the cousin had moved to California 6 months ago, and no one knew her forwarding address. "I tried to find work," Alina said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts to remain composed. "I truly did, but no one wants to hire a woman with no references and no family. The respectable positions require both, and the less respectable ones require things I cannot give." She met his eyes defiantly, daring him to judge her. "I would rather starve than sell myself." "I am glad you did not have to make that choice," Nathan said, and there was no judgment in his voice, only compassion. "But you cannot keep going like this. You need regular meals, a safe place to stay, and some way to earn your keep." Alina laughed bitterly. "I am aware. If you have any suggestions, I would be delighted to hear them, since I have exhausted all my own ideas." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Alina studied him while he considered, noticing details she had missed before. The calluses on his hands that spoke of hard physical labor, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned forward. He was handsome, she realized with a start, though not in the polished way of the young men who used to court the daughters of San Antonio's wealthy families. There was something solid about him, something trustworthy. "I have an idea," he said finally. "But I want you to hear me out before you say no, because I know how it is going to sound, and I need you to understand that I am making this offer in good faith, with no expectations of anything improper." Alina's stomach tightened with apprehension, but she nodded for him to continue. "I have been saving up to buy some land," Nathan explained. "There is a small ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Nothing fancy, but it has good water and decent grazing. The owner passed away last month, and his widow wants to sell and move back east to live with her daughter. I have enough saved for the down payment, but I need to keep working at the livery to make the monthly payments." "That is wonderful for you," Alina said slowly, not understanding what this had to do with her situation. "The thing is, the ranch house is sitting empty, and Mrs. Cooper, the widow, she keeps chickens and a vegetable garden that are going to waste because she cannot manage them on her own anymore. She mentioned she would give a discount on the purchase price to anyone willing to look after the property until the sale goes through." Nathan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You could stay there, care for the chickens, tend the garden, keep the house from falling into disrepair. In exchange, you would have a roof over your head, food to eat, and a respectable reason for being there. I would pay you a small wage out of what I am saving on the purchase price. It would not be much, but it would be honest work." Alina stared at him, trying to find the trap, the hidden price she would be expected to pay. "Why would you do this for a stranger? You do not know me." "I could be lying about everything. I could rob you blind the moment your back is turned." "You could," Nathan agreed, "but I do not think you will. Call it instinct, but I am usually a pretty good judge of character, and my gut tells me you are exactly who you say you are. A decent woman who fell on hard times and needs a helping hand." "People will talk," Alina warned. "A single woman staying at a property you are buying, even if we are not living under the same roof. The gossips will have a field day. Let them talk. As long as we know the truth, what does it matter?" Nathan stood, replacing his hat on his head. "Think about it. You can stay here tonight. I will bunk down at the livery, and in the morning, if you agree, I will take you out to meet Mrs. Cooper. If you decide this is not for you, I will help you figure out something else. But one way or another, you are not going to starve in my town. That much I can promise you." He was gone before Alina could formulate a response, the door clicking shut quietly behind him. She sat in the gathering darkness, her mind whirling. It was too good to be true, had to be, and yet Nathan Brooks had shown her nothing but kindness and respect since the moment he walked into that bakery. Perhaps, she thought, perhaps there were still good people in the world after all. Sleep claimed her quickly, her exhausted body finally able to rest now that it had been fed. And when she woke to the sound of birdsong and early morning light, she knew what her answer would be. Nathan was waiting outside when she emerged, freshly shaved and holding two paper-wrapped parcels that turned out to contain breakfast sandwiches from the hotel restaurant. They ate as they walked to the livery, where he kept a sturdy bay gelding named Copper and an older mare named Rosie that he said Alina could use for the duration of her stay at the ranch. The ride out of town was quiet, both of them seemingly lost in their own thoughts as the buildings gave way to open prairie dotted with mesquite and live oak. The August sun was already fierce, but a breeze from the south kept it from being unbearable, and Alina found herself relaxing into the rhythm of Rosie's gait, her body remembering riding lessons from a childhood that seemed a lifetime ago. Mrs. Cooper turned out to be a tiny bird of a woman in her 60s with sharp blue eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked Alina up and down with an assessing gaze that missed nothing, then turned the same scrutiny on Nathan. "This is the girl you mentioned?" she asked bluntly. "Yes, madam. Alina Nash, this is Mrs. Temperance Cooper, HMPH. You look half-starved, girl. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam," Alina replied, straightening her spine, "and sew and keep house and tend a garden. My mother and I managed on our own for 3 years after my father died." "Good. I do not hold with lazy women, no matter how pretty they might be." Mrs. Cooper turned and began walking toward a neat white farmhouse with a wide porch. "Come on, then. I will show you around and we will see if you are up to the task." The house was small but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, and a kitchen with a cast-iron stove. The furniture was simple but solid, and everything was clean if dusty from disuse. Mrs. Cooper led them through each room, pointing out the quirks of the place. The window in the bedroom that stuck unless you knew to push on the left side, the floorboard in the kitchen that creaked, the spot in the roof that sometimes leaked when it rained hard. Outside, the chicken coop housed a dozen laying hens and 1 proud rooster, while the garden boasted tomatoes, beans, squash, and various herbs, all in desperate need of weeding and watering. There was a small barn with space for 2 horses and a milk cow, though Mrs. Cooper had sold the cow the previous month. "I cannot manage it any more," she said, and for the first time, Alina heard weariness in her voice. "My Arthur built this place with his own 2 hands, and it about kills me to leave it, but my daughter has 6 children and needs help with them, and I am not getting any younger." She looked at Alina. "If you take care of it proper, keep it nice for the new owners, I will feel better about leaving. Nathan here has promised to check on you regular like, make sure you have what you need. That agreeable to you?" "More than agreeable," Alina said. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mrs. Cooper. I promise I will take good care of everything." The old woman nodded, satisfied. "I will stay on another week to show you the routines where everything is kept, what chores need doing when. After that, the place is yours to look after until the sale goes through. That should be about 3 months, maybe 4. Nathan will pay you $10 a month, plus you can keep the eggs from the chickens and whatever you harvest from the garden." "Fair, more than fair," Alina breathed, hardly able to believe her good fortune. The week that followed was a whirlwind of activity. Mrs. Cooper proved to be an exacting teacher, showing Alina every detail of running the small ranch from feeding the chickens at dawn to banking the fire at night. Alina absorbed it all like a sponge, determined to prove herself worthy of the trust being placed in her. Nathan rode out every evening after his work at the livery, ostensibly to check on the property, but really, Alina suspected, to make sure she was settling in all right. They would sit on the porch as the sun set, sharing the simple meals Alina prepared and talking about everything and nothing. She learned that he was 24, originally from Missouri, and had come to Texas 5 years ago seeking adventure and opportunity. He had worked as a ranch hand, a trail driver, and finally settled in Abilene as the head groom at the livery, a position that paid steady wages and allowed him to save for his dream of owning land. "I want something permanent," he told her one evening, his eyes on the horizon where the sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "I am tired of drifting, tired of working to make other men rich. I want a place of my own, something I can build on, maybe a family someday." He glanced at her, then quickly away. "What about you? What do you want, Alina?" She considered the question seriously, watching the chickens scratching in the dirt of their pen. "Security," she said finally. "I want to never be afraid again, never be so desperate that I have to steal bread to survive. I want to be able to take care of myself, to know that no matter what happens, I will be all right." She paused. "And maybe someday, when I have achieved all that, I would like a family too. Children who never have to know what hunger feels like." "Those are good goals," Nathan said softly, "worthy ones." When Mrs. Cooper finally departed on the morning stagecoach, pressing a jar of her special peach preserves into Alina's hands and making her promise to write if she needed anything, Alina stood on the porch of her temporary home and marveled at how much her life had changed in just 2 weeks. She had gone from starving in the streets to having a roof over her head, food in her belly, and the first stirrings of something that might, in time, become friendship with a kind and handsome cowboy. The days developed a pleasant rhythm. Alina rose with the sun, fed the chickens and collected their eggs, then worked in the garden during the cooler morning hours. After a simple lunch, she would tackle the indoor chores, cleaning, mending, organizing. She found an old sewing basket in one of the closets and spent her afternoons repairing worn linens and taking in her dresses to fit her improving figure now that she was eating regularly. As the sun began to descend, she would prepare dinner, timing it so that it was ready when Nathan arrived. His evening visits became the highlight of her days. Sometimes he would help with the heavier chores, repairing a section of fence or mucking out the barn. Other times he would simply keep her company on the porch, and they would talk until the stars came out. She learned about his childhood in Missouri, about the parents he had lost to cholera when he was 19, about the younger sister who had married a banker and moved to St. Louis. He learned about her father, a schoolteacher who had died in a riding accident, about her mother's beautiful singing voice and her talent for making even the smallest room feel like a home. As August faded into September and the brutal heat began to ease slightly, Alina realized with a start that she was happy. More than that, she was beginning to care for Nathan Brooks in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the man himself. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his hands when he helped a skittish horse, the quiet integrity that guided his every action. She found herself watching for his arrival each evening, her heart lifting at the sight of him riding up the path on Copper. It was a Sunday in mid-September when everything changed. Nathan had ridden out earlier than usual, arriving in the late morning with a picnic basket and a proposition. "It is too beautiful a day to spend working," he announced, swinging down from the saddle. "I thought we could ride out to the creek, have lunch by the water. Unless you have pressing chores that cannot wait." Alina, who had been looking forward to a day of doing very little, needed no convincing. She changed into her better dress, the blue calico she had carefully mended and pressed, and within the hour they were following a narrow trail through the prairie grass toward the sound of running water. The creek was a ribbon of silver cutting through a grove of cottonwood trees, their leaves already beginning to turn gold with the changing season. Nathan spread a blanket on the shady bank while Alina unpacked the basket, discovering fried chicken, biscuits, apples, and a jar of lemonade. "When did you have time to prepare all this?" she asked, impressed. "I may have enlisted Mrs. Patterson's help," he admitted with a grin. "She thinks I am courting the schoolteacher's daughter and was more than happy to pack a basket for me." Something in Alina's chest tightened at the mention of courting, though she forced herself to smile. "The schoolteacher's daughter. Is she pretty?" "I have no idea," Nathan said, his gray eyes locked on Alina's face. "I have never paid her any attention." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Alina had never experienced before. She looked away first, busying herself with serving the food, but she could feel Nathan's gaze on her like a physical touch. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the companionship, and afterward Nathan taught Alina to skip stones across the creek's surface. She was terrible at it, her stones sinking with ignominious plops, and his laughter at her attempts was warm and genuine, making her laugh too. When he stood behind her, his arms around hers to demonstrate the proper wrist motion, Alina's breath caught in her throat, and when she finally managed to skip a stone twice, her delighted exclamation and spin toward him brought them face to face, mere inches apart. "Alina," Nathan breathed, and there was a question in his voice, in his eyes, in the way his hand came up to gently cup her cheek. "Yes," she whispered, not entirely sure what she was agreeing to, but knowing with absolute certainty that it was the right answer. His kiss was gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious and breakable. Alina's eyes drifted closed, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, anchoring herself as the world spun around her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he confessed, "but I did not want you to feel obligated, did not want you to think that kindness came with expectations." "I do not feel obligated," Alina assured him, her heart racing. "I feel fortunate and happy, so very happy." They spent the rest of the afternoon by the creek, stealing kisses between conversation, and when they finally rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, Alina knew that her life had shifted once again, this time in the most wonderful way possible. The courtship that followed was sweet and proper, conducted under the eyes of a town that quickly learned about Nathan's intentions toward the young woman staying at the Cooper place. There was some gossip, as Alina had predicted, but Nathan handled it with quiet dignity, making it clear to anyone who asked that his regard for Miss Nash was entirely honorable, and that he intended to marry her as soon as the ranch sale was finalized, and he could provide properly for a wife. Alina floated through those weeks in a haze of joy, marveling at how drastically her circumstances had changed. The woman who had nearly starved in the streets was now courted by the finest man she had ever known, and the future that had once seemed so bleak now glowed with promise. Nathan proposed officially on the 1st of October, riding out to the ranch with a ring that had belonged to his mother, a simple gold band with a small ruby. Alina accepted with tears streaming down her face, and they sealed the engagement with a kiss on the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking and dreaming together. The wedding was planned for November, after the ranch sale was complete. Mrs. Cooper wrote her blessing from St. Louis, sending a beautiful lace tablecloth as a wedding gift. The townspeople, won over by Nathan's obvious devotion and Alina's quiet grace, rallied around the couple, the women helping Alina sew a wedding dress while the men helped Nathan prepare the ranch house for his bride. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 2 weeks before the wedding, a man rode into Abilene asking questions about Nathan Brooks. He found Nathan at the livery and introduced himself as Thomas Mitchell, a lawyer from Kansas City. I am looking for Nathan Brooks, son of William and Martha Brooks of Independence, Missouri, the lawyer said, studying Nathan's face carefully. I am he, Nathan confirmed, his gut tightening with apprehension. What is this about? I am afraid I have some difficult news, sir. Your uncle, Jonas Brooks, passed away 3 months ago. He was your father's brother, and as you were his only living relative, he has left you his entire estate. Nathan staggered, gripping the stable door for support. Uncle Jonas. But I have not seen him in over 10 years, not since before my parents died. We were never close. Perhaps not, but he thought of you nonetheless. The estate is substantial, Mr. Brooks. A ranch in Kansas, livestock, and a considerable sum in the bank. You are a wealthy man now, sir. The news spread through Abilene like wildfire, and suddenly, Alina found herself the subject of whispers that had nothing to do with propriety and everything to do with fortune hunting. She heard the murmurs when she went into town for supplies, saw the speculative glances, the knowing smirks. Convenient timing, is it not? She heard Mrs. Henderson, the baker's wife, say to another woman. Shows up starving and destitute, latches onto poor Nathan, and now look how it has worked out for her. She will be a rich man's wife. Alina held her head high and ignored the gossip, but it stung nonetheless. When Nathan rode out that evening, she met him on the porch, her expression troubled. Have you heard what they are saying? She asked without preamble. Some of it, Nathan admitted, dismounting. But Alina, you cannot let it bother you. We know the truth. Do we? Alina challenged, wrapping her arms around herself. Nathan, I met you when I had nothing. I accepted your help, your courtship, your proposal, all while I was dependent on your charity. How can you be sure that I love you for yourself and not for what you can provide? Nathan crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. Because I know you. I have watched you work yourself to exhaustion tending this place. I have seen you mend clothes until your fingers bled because you refused to ask for money for new ones. I have listened to you talk about your dreams, and not once have they included wealth or luxury. You want security, yes, but that is not the same as wanting riches. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. I know your heart, Alina Nash, and it is good and true. But what if you are wrong? She whispered. What if somewhere deep inside I was drawn to you because you represented safety and stability? How can we know for certain? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, then released her and stepped back. We could wait. Put the wedding off for a year. Give you time to be independent, to see if your feelings change when you are not dependent on me for survival. Alina's heart clenched painfully at the thought, but she forced herself to consider it rationally. Could she endure a year apart from him, a year of doubt and speculation? Could he? Or, Nathan continued, his voice soft, you could trust what we have built these past months. Trust that what we feel is real, regardless of how or why it started. I love you, Alina. I loved you before I knew about the inheritance, and I would love you still if I lost every penny tomorrow. Can you say the same about your feelings for me? Alina thought of the way her heart leaped when she saw him riding up the path each evening, the joy she found in his smile, the peace she felt in his arms. She thought of how she admired his kindness, his integrity, his quiet strength. Money had nothing to do with any of it. I love you, she said clearly, meeting his eyes without flinching. I love your compassion and your generosity. I love the way you laugh and the way you listen when I talk. I love your hands and your eyes and the way you always smell like leather and sunshine. I would love you if you were a pauper, Nathan Brooks, because it is not what you have that captured my heart. It is who you are. The tension drained from Nathan's shoulders, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Then let them gossip. Let them think what they want. We know the truth, and that is all that matters. The wedding took place as planned on a crisp November morning, with half the town in attendance despite the rumors. Alina walked down the aisle of the small church in her white dress, her bouquet of late autumn flowers trembling in her hands, and when she reached Nathan's side and saw the love shining in his eyes, every doubt evaporated like morning mist. They exchanged vows in front of God and witnesses, pledging to love and honor each other through whatever trials life might bring. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan's kiss was tender and full of promise. The reception was held at the hotel, a simple affair with cake and lemonade and dancing to the music of a local fiddler. Alina danced with her husband, her heart so full she thought it might burst, and when they finally slipped away to spend their wedding night at the ranch house that would be their home until they decided what to do about the Kansas property, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, Nathan taking his time to ease Alina's nervousness, and afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, he traced patterns on her bare shoulder and spoke of the future. "I have been thinking about the Kansas ranch," he said. "Uncle Jonas's place is much larger than this one, better land, more opportunity. We could make a real go of it there, build something substantial." Alina was quiet, torn between excitement at the prospect and sadness at leaving the place that had been her salvation. "What about Abilene? What about this ranch? We could sell it, use the money to improve the Kansas property. Or we could keep it, hire someone to manage it. I have not decided yet." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "What do you think? Would you be willing to move to Kansas?" "I would go anywhere with you," Alina said honestly. "But I confess I have grown attached to this place. It represents so much, you know. My fresh start, our beginning." "I know," Nathan murmured. "We do not have to decide right away. Let us just enjoy being married for a while, and we will figure out the rest as we go." December brought cold winds and occasional freezing rain, keeping them close to the fire in the evenings. Alina took over all the household duties, while Nathan continued his work at the livery, saving his wages now for improvements rather than land purchase, since they already owned property. They talked often about the Kansas ranch, weighing the pros and cons of moving versus staying, but came to no firm decision. Christmas was a quiet affair, just the two of them exchanging modest gifts and sharing a special dinner that Alina had spent days preparing. Nathan gave her a beautiful shawl in deep green wool, and she gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, embroidered with his initials on the cuff. They attended Christmas service at the church and returned home to make love in front of the fireplace, the only light coming from the flames and the stars visible through the window. It was in January that Alina began to suspect she might be with child. Her courses were late, and she found herself exhausted in the afternoons, needing to lie down for a nap like a child herself. She said nothing to Nathan at first, wanting to be certain, but when February arrived and her symptoms continued, she could no longer deny the truth. She told him on Valentine's Day, presenting him with a tiny pair of knitted booties she had been secretly working on. He stared at them in confusion for a moment before understanding dawned, and then he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the chickens, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "A baby," he breathed, setting her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. When? Late summer, I think. August or September." Alina covered his hands with hers, her eyes shining. "Are you happy?" "Happy, Alina, I am beyond happy, I am blessed." He kissed her deeply, then pulled back with sudden worry. "Should you be doing all the work around here? You should be resting, taking care of yourself. Maybe we should hire a girl to help with the chores." Alina laughed, delighted by his concern. "I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been working through pregnancy since the beginning of time. But perhaps in the later months, some help would not be amiss. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring, Alina blooming with health despite the occasional bout of morning sickness. They decided finally to stay in Abilene. The Kansas ranch was sold to a family friend of Uncle Jonas's who had been managing it anyway, and the proceeds were invested wisely, providing them with a comfortable cushion of security. Nathan used some of the money to purchase the Abilene ranch outright from Mrs. Cooper's estate, then invested in improvements: a larger barn, a proper smokehouse, fencing for additional pasture. He quit his job at the livery to focus on building up their cattle herd, purchasing a dozen head of good breeding stock and hiring a young cowhand named Sam to help with the heavy work. As Alina's belly swelled through the summer months, Nathan fussed over her constantly, making her put her feet up, bringing her cold water from the well, insisting she stay out of the worst of the heat. She bore his attention with amused patience, secretly loving the way he worried even as she insisted she was perfectly fine. August arrived hot and humid, and Alina grew increasingly uncomfortable, her back aching and her ankles swelling. The town doctor, a kindly older man named Dr. Harrison, checked on her weekly and pronounced everything normal and healthy. "First babies like to take their time," he told her during his last visit. "Could be another few weeks yet, so try to be patient." But the baby, it seemed, had other plans. Alina's labor began in the early hours of a scorching August morning, exactly 1 year after the day Nathan had saved her from the baker's wrath. The pain started as a dull ache in her back and rapidly progressed to something far more intense. Nathan, terrified despite Dr. Harrison's assurances that labor was a natural process, sent Sam racing into town to fetch the doctor and the midwife, then hovered anxiously while Alina paced the bedroom, pausing to breathe through contractions. "You should wait outside," she told him between pains. "This is not something men typically witness." "I am not leaving you," Nathan said firmly, taking her hand. "I am staying right here, and that is final." As it turned out, Alina was grateful for his presence. Labor proved to be every bit as difficult as she had been warned. Hours of relentless pain that seemed to have no end. Nathan held her hand, wiped her forehead with cool cloths, whispered encouragement when she was certain she could not go on. Finally, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to both parents' eyes. Dr. Harrison placed the baby in Alina's arms, and she stared down at the tiny, perfect face in wonder. "He is beautiful," Nathan breathed, touching one impossibly small fist with a gentle finger. "He is perfect. What shall we name him?" They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, never quite settling on one. But now, looking at her son's face, Alina knew exactly what he should be called. "William," she said, "after your father. William Arthur Brooks for both our fathers." Nathan's eyes filled with tears, and he kissed her forehead reverently. "Perfect. It is perfect. You are perfect." "God, Alina, I love you so much." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. William was a healthy, hungry baby who demanded attention at all hours, but Alina had never been happier. She spent her days caring for her son, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, the way he fit perfectly in the crook of her arm. Nathan was a devoted father, rising in the night to bring William to Alina for feeding, walking the floor with his son when colic made him fussy, changing nappies without complaint. Watching him with their child, Alina fell in love with him all over again, deeper than she had thought possible. As autumn painted the prairie in golds and reds, they settled into a comfortable routine. The ranch was prospering, the cattle herd growing, and Nathan hired 2 more hands to help manage the work. Eleanor, with the help of a young girl from town named Sarah, kept the household running smoothly, cooking and cleaning and caring for William. Life was good, so good that sometimes Eleanor had to pinch herself to believe it was real. From starving in the streets to this, a loving husband, a beautiful son, a home of her own and security she had once only dreamed of. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she thought back to that desperate August day when she had stolen bread, and she marveled at how that single act of desperation had led to everything she now held dear. "You ever regret it?" she asked Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch, William sleeping in her arms. "If I had not stolen that bread, you might have married someone else, someone without all the scandal and gossip." Nathan looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "Regret you? Eleanor, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I thank God every day that I walked into that bakery when I did, that I was there to help you. You have given me everything, a home, a son, a purpose beyond just existing from day to day. How could I possibly regret that?" "I just wanted to be sure," Eleanor said softly. "I wanted to know that you are as happy as I am." "Happier," Nathan declared, leaning over to kiss her, "because I have you." The years that followed were filled with the ordinary joys and challenges of ranch life. The herd grew, the ranch expanded, and their family expanded too. A daughter, Martha Eleanor, arrived 2 years after William, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes. Then came another son, Jonas, named for the uncle whose generosity had helped secure their future. And finally, another daughter, Temperance, named for Mrs. Cooper, who had given Eleanor her first chance at a new life. The children grew up strong and healthy, helping with chores as soon as they were old enough, learning the value of hard work and honest living. William showed a gift for working with horses, while Martha proved to have her mother's talent for sewing and her father's head for numbers. Jonas was the adventurous one, always getting into scrapes, and little Temperance was the peacemaker, mediating disputes between her siblings with a wisdom beyond her years. Eleanor and Nathan grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. The passion of their early romance mellowed into something richer and more profound, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared struggles, and countless small acts of love. Sometimes, on warm summer evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch their children play in the yard, and Nathan would take Eleanor's hand and bring it to his lips. "Remember the day we met," he would say, because it had become a sort of ritual between them. "I remember," Eleanor would reply. "I was desperate and starving, and you were my savior." "You were never a burden," Nathan would insist, as he always did. "You were a gift, the best gift I ever received." And Eleanor, secure in his love and in the life they had built together, would lean her head on his shoulder and thank God for the day she had been hungry enough to steal bread, and blessed enough to be saved by the best man she had ever known. The ranch continued to prosper over the decades, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Nathan's reputation as a fair and honest rancher earned him respect throughout Texas, and Eleanor became known for her charity work, never forgetting what it was like to be desperate and alone. She made sure that no one in Abilene went hungry if she could help it, organizing food drives and helping establish a charity kitchen in town that fed anyone who needed a meal. Their children grew, and eventually married and started families of their own. William took over the main ranch operations, bringing his wife and children to live in a new house they built on the north pasture. Martha married a lawyer from Austin and moved to the city, but visited often. Jonas, true to his adventurous nature, became a Texas Ranger, though he promised his worried mother he would be careful. Temperance married a young rancher from a neighboring spread, and together they started their own place not far from her parents. As Nathan and Alina entered their later years, gray-haired and wrinkled but still deeply in love, they would often sit together on the porch they had shared so many conversations on over the years, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. 12 grandchildren now, Alina marveled one evening doing a mental tally. Can you believe it? When I think about where I started, it seems impossible that all of this came from that one terrible, wonderful day. Nothing is impossible with the right person by your side, Nathan said, his hand finding hers with the ease of long practice. His grip was not as strong as it once was, his fingers knotted with age, but the love in his touch was undiminished. You made me the man I am today, Alina. Everything good in my life traces back to you. We made each other, Alina corrected gently. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You saw past the desperate thief to the woman I could be with a little help and kindness. I would not be here without you, Nathan Brooks. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, the sounds of evening settling around them, cattle lowing in the distance, chickens settling in for the night, the laughter of their grandchildren playing in the yard under their parents' watchful eyes. Do you remember what you said to me that first night in your room above the livery? Alina asked suddenly. You said you wanted something permanent, something you could build on, maybe a family someday. I remember, Nathan confirmed. I also remember what you said. You wanted security, wanted to never be afraid again. We both got what we wanted, Alina said, satisfaction warming her voice, and so much more besides. We got each other. Nathan raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles in the gesture that had become his signature expression of affection over their long years together. Best decision I ever made, paying for that bread. Best decision I ever made, accepting your help, Alina countered. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, their grandchildren were called in for supper by their parents, protests and laughter floating on the evening breeze. Alina and Nathan remained on the porch, reluctant to end the perfect moment. I love you, Nathan said quietly. Just in case I have not told you today. You told me this morning at lunch and an hour ago, Alina replied with a soft laugh. But I never tire of hearing it. I love you too, Nathan, more than I can say. They finally rose and went inside as full darkness fell, moving slowly but still side by side, still a team after all these years. The house smelled of baking bread, a scent that always made Alina smile now instead of bringing back painful memories of hunger and desperation. Their daughter-in-law had left supper warming on the stove, and they ate together at the old kitchen table, the same one Mrs. Cooper had left when she sold the place all those years ago. So much had changed since then, yet so much remained the same. The love that had bloomed in the wake of an act of kindness had only grown stronger and deeper with time. After supper, they prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of a long married couple, each knowing the other's habits and preferences. Nathan banked the fire while Alina checked that the doors were locked. They met in the bedroom they had shared for decades, helping each other with buttons and laces that arthritic fingers struggled with. In bed, they lay facing each other, hands clasped between them, and talked quietly about their day, their children, their plans for tomorrow. It was a ritual as old as their marriage, this ending to every day, and neither would have given it up for anything. Happy? Nathan asked, as he had asked 1,000 times over the years. Happier than I ever dreamed possible, Alina answered, as she always did. You, more than I deserve, Nathan said, but grateful for every moment. They drifted off to sleep, still holding hands, still together, still in love after all the years and all the changes life had brought. Outside, the Texas night was clear and cool, stars glittering in the vast sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. The seasons continued their eternal dance, years rolling into decades, and Nathan and Alina grew old together with grace and gratitude. They faced the challenges of aging as they had faced everything else in their lives, together, with courage and good humor. When Nathan's joints ached with rheumatism, Alina would rub liniment into them with gentle hands. When Alina's eyesight began to fail, Nathan would read to her in the evenings, his voice bringing her favorite stories to life. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, the house bursting with family and laughter. The party lasted all day, with food and music and stories shared about the couple who had built such a strong, loving legacy. William stood to give a toast, raising his glass high. To my parents, who taught me that true love is not just about passion or romance, though they have plenty of both. True love is about choosing each other every single day through good times and bad. It is about kindness and respect and partnership. You two set an example that I can only hope to live up to. Happy anniversary, and may you have many more years together. The sentiment was echoed by all present, glasses raised and voices joined in celebration. Alina, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, looked at Nathan and saw him looking back at her with the same love and devotion that had been in his eyes on their wedding day. 50 years, she whispered to him later, when the party had wound down and most of the guests had departed. Can you believe it has been 50 years since we married? 51 since we met, Nathan pointed out. 51 years since I walked into that bakery and found my future. Your future was awful skinny and desperate, Alina teased, though her eyes were serious. I still cannot quite believe you saw anything worth saving in me that day. I saw everything, Nathan said simply. I saw courage and dignity in the face of desperation. I saw a woman who would rather starve than compromise her principles. I saw the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, though I did not know it quite yet. They made their way slowly to their bedroom, leaning on each other for support, both physical and emotional as they always had. The years had bent them but not broken them, had slowed them but not stopped them. They were still Nathan and Alina, still partners, still best friends, still desperately in love. As they settled into bed that night, Alina found herself thinking back over their long life together. She thought of the scared, starving girl she had been, and the confident, secure woman she had become. She thought of the lonely cowboy who had risked his reputation to help a stranger, and the respected rancher and patriarch he had grown into. She thought of all the moments, big and small, that had made up their marriage. The births of their children, the building of the ranch, quiet evenings on the porch, passionate nights in each other's arms, arguments and reconciliations, laughter and tears. Thank you, she said suddenly into the darkness. For what? Nathan asked, though his voice suggested he knew. For everything. For saving me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for 51 years of being the best man I have ever known. Nathan pulled her closer, tucking her against his side where she fit perfectly as she always had. The honor was all mine, my love. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Before you, I was just drifting, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to build something lasting. Everything good in my life comes from you. Alina pressed a kiss to his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him that had become as familiar as her own. We are a team, she said. We always have been. Neither one of us could have done this alone. Then thank God we did not have to, Nathan murmured, his eyes drifting closed. Thank God we found each other. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had countless times before, secure in their love and in the knowledge that whatever time they had left, they would face it together. As it happened, they were granted several more good years. They watched more grandchildren grow and marry, welcomed more great-grandchildren into the world. The ranch thrived under William's capable management, and their other children all prospered in their chosen paths. Alina's charity work continued, now carried on by her daughters and daughters-in-law, ensuring that her legacy of compassion would outlive her. Nathan, even in his late 70s, would still ride out occasionally to check the cattle, though he no longer went alone. William or one of the ranch hands would accompany him, ready to help if needed, though Nathan's pride preferred to pretend it was just for the company. Alina spent her days surrounded by family, teaching her granddaughters to sew and cook, telling stories to the little ones, offering advice to the young mothers. Her house was always full of life and love, exactly as she had dreamed during those dark days of hunger and loneliness so long ago. On a warm spring evening, as the Texas wildflowers painted the prairie in brilliant colors, Alina and Nathan sat on their porch for what would be one of their last times together. Nathan had been feeling poorly lately, his heart weakening, and they both knew their time was growing short. But on this evening he felt well enough to enjoy the sunset, and Alina was not going to waste a moment of it. "Beautiful, is it not?" she said, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. "I never tire of this view." "Neither do I," Nathan agreed, though his eyes were on her face rather than the horizon. "Best view in Texas, right here on this porch." Alina caught his gaze and smiled, understanding his meaning. "Charmer, you are still a charmer after all these years." "Only for you," Nathan said. "Only ever for you." He took her hand, his grip weak but his touch gentle. "Alina, if something should happen to me—" "Hush," she interrupted. "Do not talk like that." "We have to talk about it eventually," Nathan said reasonably. "We are not young anymore, my love. And I need you to know that if I go first, I will be waiting for you. However long it takes, I will be waiting on the other side, ready to start our next adventure together." Tears filled Alina's eyes, but she blinked them back determinedly. "And if I go first, you had better not keep me waiting too long. I am not a patient woman, Nathan Brooks," he laughed, the sound weaker than it used to be but still warm and genuine. "I know, my dear. Believe me, I know." They sat together until the stars came out, hands clasped, hearts joined as they had been for more than half a century. When the night grew cold, William came to help his father inside, and Alina followed, grateful for every moment she still had with her husband. Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, Alina beside him as she had been for 53 years. She held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering her love to him one final time, and though her heart shattered into a million pieces, there was comfort in knowing he had lived a full, happy life surrounded by love. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Texas, testament to the respect and affection Nathan had earned over his long life. Alina sat surrounded by her children and grandchildren, accepting condolences with quiet dignity, her eyes dry though her heart wept. That night, alone in their bed for the first time in decades, Alina lay in the darkness and spoke to Nathan as if he could hear her. She told him about the service, about how many people had come to pay their respects. She told him about their great-grandson, born just 2 days after Nathan's passing, who William had named Nathan in his grandfather's honor. She told him she loved him, would always love him, and that she would see him again when her time came. The months that followed were difficult. Alina had never lived alone, had never had to navigate the world without Nathan by her side. But she was not actually alone. Her family surrounded her with love and support, making sure she was never lonely for long. She threw herself into her charity work, finding purpose in helping others as Nathan had once helped her. She lived for 3 more years, years filled with her children and grandchildren, with quilting bays and church socials, with quiet moments of remembrance and gratitude for the life she had been privileged to live. When her time finally came on a summer morning very much like the one when she had first met Nathan, she went peacefully, a smile on her face. Her last words, whispered to Martha who sat holding her hand, were simple and profound. "Tell them all I love them, and tell your father I am coming home." Alina was laid to rest beside Nathan in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates in a single line. Together forever, from bread to blessing. The story of how they met became family legend, passed down through generations. Great-great-grandchildren would ask to hear about the day great-great-grandmother Alina stole bread, and great-great-grandfather Nathan saved her, and the story would be told with love and pride. The ranch continued to thrive, staying in the family for generations, a living testament to what 2 people could build when they chose love and partnership over fear and isolation. The charity kitchen Alina had started still operated, feeding the hungry and desperate, ensuring that no one in Abilene would have to steal bread to survive. And on quiet evenings, when the sunset painted the Texas sky in brilliant colors, family members would gather on the old porch, now lovingly maintained and preserved, and they would tell stories of Nathan and Alina. Stories of courage and kindness, of second chances and transformative love, of 2 people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a legacy that would last for generations. The bread Alina had stolen had cost 15 cents. The love it led to was priceless, eternal, and proved that sometimes the most desperate moments can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. From starvation to salvation, from stranger to soulmate, from a simple act of kindness to a lifetime of love, that was the story of Nathan Brooks and Alina Nash. And it was a story worth telling again and again. A reminder that love can bloom anywhere, even in the dusty streets of a Texas town, even in the heart of a starving woman and the cowboy who saw not what she had done, but who she could become. Their love story became the foundation upon which an entire family built their understanding of what love should be. Generous, patient, kind, enduring. It set the standard for how partners should treat each other, how families should support one another, how communities should care for their most vulnerable members. Long after Alina and Nathan were gone, their great-grandchildren would walk the land they had cultivated, ride horses descended from Copper and Rosie, and sit on the porch where 2 people had fallen in love over simple conversations and shared dreams. The house still stood, now over 100 years old, carefully preserved and maintained, a piece of family history too precious to lose. In the room where Alina had once sewn her wedding dress, a young bride would prepare for her own wedding. In the kitchen where Nathan and Alina had shared countless meals, new generations would gather for holiday dinners. In the bedroom where their children had been born, new babies would take their first breaths, continuing the cycle of life and love. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the light was just right, and the breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, those gathered on the porch would swear they could feel the presence of Nathan and Alina, still watching over the family they had created, still loving each other across the veil between worlds, still together as they had always been meant to be. The story that began with a stolen loaf of bread ended with a legacy of love that would never die, a testament to the truth that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and that true love, once found, lasts not just a lifetime but for all eternity.